Hey, how's everything going, guys? It's your host again, Rocco, and today we're going to be talking about the 15th Rush studio album, Counterparts. Can't believe we're already on number 15, guys. We got four more to go after this. It's kind of bittersweet. I mean, honestly, reviewing these albums has made me go back and really listen to every single track in depth and really think about what I'm going to say and what I'm going to discuss on the review. Really made me gain a whole new appreciation for a lot of tracks, especially off Roll the Bones. If you saw that review, you'll notice that, like, my opinion on that album really skyrocketed over the years. Now, again, it's still not one of my absolute favorites, but it's definitely a solid album, whereas in the past, I always thought it was kind of bad, to be honest. But this album here, you know, it's no question. Counterparts is a fantastic Rush album. By far their best album until Snakes and Arrows. Maybe even better than, I think I like this album better than Snakes and Arrows. They're kind of neck and neck. Definitely don't like it as much as Clockwork Angels, but it's up there. So this is definitely one of the last hurrahs of Rush, and a fantastic, hard-hitting, heavy album that just came out of nowhere, took the world by storm. Literally, this album did so well on the charts, and really put Rush back into their hard rock comfort zone, which I love. And honestly, this album here, it was one of the last Rush albums I got into. I think the only one I hadn't heard up to this point was Test for Echo and Vapor Trails. I had already heard Snakes and Arrows and Clockwork Angels and all the ones previous to it. And this was a pleasant surprise, because you look at the album cover and it's just this blue thing with a nut and bolt kind of going in it. It just looks like a very uninspired album, and especially coming off of things like Presto and Roll the Bones at the time, which I wasn't a fan of. I wasn't expecting this album to be very good. But then I put that shit on, and holy shit, this album spoke to me. I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm a huge hard rock, huge heavy metal fan. I like those genres like just as much as jazz, just as much as progressive rock. And when one of my favorite progressive rock bands of all time, who also mastered the hard rock scene way back in the 70s, when they bring that back and bring it back full force, it's just an amazing feeling. And right from day one, I always loved this album. Sure, this isn't like a heavy metal album. There are a lot of like lighter weight moments in the middle, kind of like Speed of Love and that other track in the middle. Can't remember it at the moment, but for some reason. But you know what I mean. It's not like a heavy album through and through, but there are some heavy ass sections on the album, and the guitar is finally back at the forefront. Again, with Presto, the guitar definitely took a step up, but it had this thin production sound where at the end of the day it was kind of pointless. And then Roll the Bones, also the guitar stepped up even more, but there was still a lot of synth, still a lot of poppiness to it. On this album, we're back, baby. Alex Lifeson is back in business, just full on heavy metal hard rock riffs. And it's an incredible album. And clocking in at about 55 minutes, it does kind of suffer from what a lot of the other Rush albums had. It does have a few filler moments, a few filler tracks, but overall, if you look at it from a bird's eye view, this is just a fantastic Rush album, and definitely the best since Power Windows. I'd put this right on par with Power Windows. Maybe, I know I really like Power Windows. I don't know, call me crazy, guys, but I'd put this on par with Power Windows. That's how much I like it. And I love my Power Windows, but yeah, Counterparts is great. And my opinion on this album hasn't wavered one bit for the past like 5-6 years since when I first heard it. I've always loved it, and I love it to this day. So this is going to be an awesome experience for me, diving into the album. Listened to it a few times earlier today, and fuck yeah, it's amazing. So now we're just going to be talking about a little bit of the background information behind it, and where Rush were before this album, where they were headed, and just what was going on. So let's get right into that. All right, guys, so let's turn the page back to 1992 when Rush went out on their Roll the Bones tour. Now, this tour here was a turning point for Rush because, needless to say, it was a successful tour. The band had a good time on it, but it really uncovered some tensions between Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson. Now, the thing about this tour is that when they played the Roll the Bones songs live, they sounded so much heavier than in the studio. And this really inspired Alex Lifeson to really go on an all-out kind of mission or crusade to ensure that their next album had no keyboard whatsoever, because he loved the live sound of Roll the Bones, and it convinced the guy that the keyboard sound on the Roll the Bones studio album was kind of holding it back. Really, it wasn't just the keyboards, it was more of the production as well, because the keyboards are pretty minimal on Roll the Bones. They're still there, they're still noticeable, but they're minimal. I think it was more of a thinner production than they wanted. But nonetheless, on the tour, Alex Lifeson was hell-bent on making a heavy, guitar-oriented album. And that kind of clashed a bit with Geddy Lee because, as we all know, Geddy Lee was into the keyboards and he always wanted to use them. Although that they did transition to a more guitar-oriented sound, he was still a huge proponent of using the keyboards as kind of like a background instrument. And he thought that they were going to be doing that, full force on the next album. But Alex Lifeson kind of shut him down. And at this point, like, they were pretty confident in themselves. They'd spent some time apart after the tour. So according to Geddy Lee, that time apart really made them confident in their own musical ambitions and their own musical preferences. So when they came back to write the new album, they did clash a bit because Alex Lifeson did say that this album should have absolutely no keyboards, and Geddy Lee still brought him into the writing sessions, and that created kind of like a tense atmosphere. So for the first time in Rush's history, there were some musical differences there. But I got to agree with Alex Lifeson on this one. They had really done all they could do with the keyboards. I mean, I love Geddy Lee, one of the greatest musicians of all time. But in terms of his keyboard development, nothing really happened from Signals all the way up to Counterparts. Like, he didn't really develop as a keyboard player. So they really did all they could do with that. So I'm going to give this fight to Alex Lifeson. But needless to say, the writing sessions for this album went pretty not the best. Again, there were the tensions going on, and apparently they had lots of technical difficulties. I don't know which kind of technical difficulties, but it doesn't really specify in the sources I've read. But apparently it delayed Neil Peart to the point where he had to write and arrange all his drum parts in like 11 days or 3 days or something. Such 11 drum tracks in 3 days. And needless to say, Neil Peart, he's the fucking professor. He did it with ease. His work ethic is just beyond anyone's comprehension. So the sessions didn't go as well as possible, but the band did really gel, and they really did write some fantastic, interesting songs, as we'll get into. And they really did want a more organic feel on the album. They took a more spontaneous approach. And again, they were influenced by the bands that actually opened up for them on the Roll the Bones tour. So that was another factor. I think Pearl Jam and Primus, not huge fans of either of those bands, but those bands opened for Rush. And they took a way more, organic, kind of less well thought out, but less contemplative approach to making music. Like, they just went into the studio and like did their shit, didn't think about it too much, and they got a raw sound from that. And again, we're deep into the grunge period at this point, and that definitely inspired Rush. So that's what they did. So they had a more organic approach to writing and recording the album. And but here's the main thing about this album. They needed a new producer because their previous producer, Rupert Hine, wasn't doing it for them anymore. They enjoyed working with him on Presto and Roll the Bones. But again, Alex Lifeson was hell-bent on getting rid of any thin-sounding shit. So Rupert Hine had to go. So they let him go. And who did they get back? Now, when I read this, I died of laughter, guys. You're not going to believe who they got back to produce their albums. No, not Terry Brown. Peter Collins, the fucking producer from Power Windows and Hold Your Fire, who's heavily criticized for introducing cheesy sounding production and 80s synth sounding production into the Rush discography. So literally the least fucking likely person came back to produce this album, which ends up being one of Rush's heaviest albums, and probably their heaviest right up until Clockwork Angels. So I found that so funny, so unexpected. And apparently the guy, he was just a huge music fan. Like, he wasn't hell-bent on making the band sound cheesy in the 80s. That's just what he was into at the time. Now, apparently, since then, he produced a lot more bands. And at this point, he was into hard rock. So, really, the guy he was a great producer. He wasn't trying to make Rush sound commercial. He was just into what he was into. And came through in the music. So, at this point, he was probably into grunge and hard rock and stuff. And his production was just what Rush needed. So yeah, Peter Collins came back. I guess you could say totally redeemed himself. If you guys hate the production on Power Windows and Hold Your Fire, this is completely different. This is a raw, organic, balls to the wall, hard rock production that, it's fantastic. And he had a pretty strong influence on the album overall. He suggested a lot of great things, like bringing in the string section on Nobody's Hero and things like that. So really, Peter Collins did have a profound effect on the production of this album, which is really cool, considering how hated he was by Rush fans today, how he ruined Rush's sound in the late 80s. Total nonsense. But yeah, so they recorded this album in Les Studios here in Quebec, Canada, which they recorded Moving Pictures in and a whole bunch of other fucking albums. Which is really cool. And they released the album, and it's funny because when this album was released, Alex Lifeson, all the interviews, he bragged about, how they finally got back to the guitar-oriented roots, which is hilarious because he literally said that on every album preceding this, pretty much since Grace Under Pressure. Literally, since Grace Under Pressure. Every time they interview this guy, he's go, yeah, we're bringing back more guitar, but this time, I can honestly say he was right, okay? This was the first time, okay, maybe Roll the Bones, where Alex Lifeson was actually credible saying that the guitar is back at the forefront. Because the fucking guy was saying it on Grace Under Pressure, which was one of their most synth-heavy albums. So I always found that hilarious. And, apparently after the studio recordings, there was still some tension between Geddy Lee and Alex. Apparently they had a lot of arguments and everything. And I don't know how exaggerated this is. This was just from one interview I was reading with Geddy Lee. So who knows if he was exaggerating at the time. But even on the following tour, the Counterparts tour, they weren't getting along that well. And good thing it would just last for this tour, because afterwards, we know these guys have been best of friends since childhood, and it's amazing how to this day in 2020 they're still tight as fuck. So that sounded wrong, but you know what I mean. So it's just really inspirational to for men to have lifelong friendships, which is really important to me as well. A lot of men, not to go off on a tangent, but a lot of men these days can't really seem to hold down lifelong friends. And it's a shame. I'm an exception to that, I'm proud to say, but it's a shame. But yeah, anyway, guys, this album was released, and it did fantastic. I think this was just what Rush needed at the moment in the grunge hard rock scene that was brewing at the time to really claim back some critical success. Because here they had a lot of critical success and commercial success. The album skyrocketed to number 2 on Billboard, which is fantastic. Probably their highest charting position since Moving Pictures. And the general public was eating it up. Now, it's interesting because this album didn't end up going platinum. It did in Canada, but not in the States. But nonetheless, at the time, it just really did well. And Rush were back in the spotlight after about almost 20 years of being a band, which is incredible. If you think about it, 73, 74 was their first album. And we're in like 93 right now, so it's incredible. And by the way, this was released in October of 1993. So just to get the dates right here. So yeah, guys, that's pretty much the history behind the album. Pretty interesting stuff. Some pretty unexpected twists and turns there. But it produced a fantastic album. So now, without further ado, let's just get into my overall review of Counterparts. So what can you possibly say about Counterparts? Well, not much more than what's already been said earlier in the video. This was Rush's full-fledged return to riff-based rock. And when I mean riff-based rock, I don't say that lightly. I mean, some of the riffs on this album are Tony Iommi level doom. I'm telling you guys. Okay, maybe like just one or two of the many riffs on the album. But this is a really hard-hitting album, and a heavy album at that. Not just musically, but also lyrically. So this album here, not as experimental as Roll the Bones. On Roll the Bones, they tried a lot of different things. And I'm not just talking about like the rap section on the title track, but really a lot of the tracks really had this weird experimental kind of vibe that we hadn't really heard from Rush in a while. You could tell they were really having a good time. This one here is a little bit more straightforward. They did incorporate another instrumental, which I want to talk about because the instrumental on Roll the Bones was kind of disappointing to me. It's not bad, but it's not amazing. We expect a higher caliber standard from Rush. And they definitely deliver on this album. Now, the instrumental on this album, it's not as good as YYZ or La Villa Strangiato, but then again, what is? But it's up there. Like, it's a really good instrumental. And I used to be obsessed with this track. It waned on me a bit over the years, but it's a great instrumental. So a little bit for the prog fans to latch onto there. But other than the instrumental, there's not much progressive stuff going on this album. So a little bit less risky than Roll the Bones. Kind of just like a straight up hard rock album. And I mentioned that the lyrics as well are pretty dark on this album. And that's that's definitely a good point to make, because if you think about it, this album probably has the darkest subject matter of any Rush album up to this point. I mean, there's songs that deal with like AIDS, homosexuality, kind of clashing with what's the word I'm looking for here? Kind of like clashing with conventional songwriting at the time. Like no one was really singing about that stuff as openly as Rush. Again, if you can like give me a counter example, go ahead. But I haven't really heard anything about really like a pop based, not a pop song. You know what I mean? Like a song in popular culture from this time, really addressing like the AIDS crisis and everything. And not that the song I'm referring to really deals with AIDS. That's just a part of the song. But yeah, it's still pretty mature. And then other topics like divorce as well on the album, and a few love songs, but exploring the more mature side of love, like the expectations between a man and a woman, not man meets woman, bones woman, moves on, or just a sappy love song. Really meaningful stuff. So a very, very dark album. And the more I think about it, I can't really think of any Rush album that's as dark as this one in terms of subject matter. So, and Neil Peart's lyrics, it's not that the album's dark in and of itself. It's that the way Neil Peart phrases the lyrics is phenomenal, and really adds to that. So probably the best lyrics since Power Windows, I'd say. Power Windows has really strong lyrics for me. Middletown Dreams, Territories, Manhattan Project, a lot of great stuff there. So yeah, pretty much since then the lyrics haven't been as great, but Neil Peart is back in the swing of things on this album, and really great lyrics from Neil Peart. What else should I say about this? I don't know what else to mention about it. Oh yeah, so we should also address the keyboards. So as I mentioned, that Alex Lifeson and Geddy Lee were really clashing over the keyboard debate on this album. And Alex Lifeson definitely won out on that debate. But there is still a little bit of keyboard on here. So it's not completely keyboard free, but it's very tasteful, never overpowering, and it never has that cheesy sound. Like it always sounds like an authentic keyboard sound. Best example of that's on the I was going to say the title track. On the first track, Animate, where they use an organ, which was literally, like, I can't remember the last time Rush used an organ, but it sounds a lot more organic and a lot less synthesized, which is what they were doing on the previous album. So the keyboard that they do use is really tasteful and a little bit more old-fashioned in a good way. I think that old-fashioned keyboard sound from like the early 70s aged a lot fucking better than the overly synthesized, cheesy tones of like the mid to late 80s. So I really like that about the album. Also, the structure of the album. I mentioned that the album's 55 minutes and it's a bit long. Again, this has that early CD era where bands were just trying to cram on all they could onto the albums. And I just have an issue with like the pacing of the album. It starts off fucking phenomenal. The first 4 tracks are bam, 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 just hitting you across the head with excellence. Then the 5th track is good, not amazing. And then it dips a bit in quality. So then the next 2 tracks, so for the next 12 minutes of the album, it's a little bit mediocre compared to the rest. And then it slowly, gradually builds back up very strong. So it has a very strong start and finish. But the middle of the album is definitely weaker. And I think if they paced them out a little bit better, or maybe even eliminated 1 or 2 tracks on the album, made them bonus tracks, it would have worked a lot better. But again, those are minor complaints, and overall, as a nice package, this album is as great as you can get. I mean, you can't complain about this one. It's like the black sheep of Rush at this point. Again, nothing they made was this heavy up till this point. It just came out of nowhere. And even with Roll the Bones, although the guitar came back, that album was a lot more playful, a lot on the brighter side than this album. Now, the more I think about it, the more it's like, this is like the yin to the yang of Roll the Bones, or vice versa. Roll the Bones is like the guitar-oriented album that really looks on the brighter side, on the more joyous side, really just, what's the word I'm looking for? More just throwing caution to the wind. And this album's more dark and brooding and fucking heavy. So again, these 2 albums kind of go hand in hand. And then I don't know what the fuck happened on Test for Echo. That's kind of like just a mess anyway. But yeah. So that's pretty much all I got to say about Counterparts for now. So let's just dive into the track-by-track reviews.
Polarize me, sensitize me, criticize me, civilize me.
Kicking off the album, we got Animate. And I don't know a single person who doesn't love this track? I mean, even if you're not a fan of Counterparts, you gotta love the song Animate. I mean, this song here is just a Rush classic, and it's kind of unique among Rush classics because really this song here, although like instrumentally it's fantastic, it probably goes through the least time signature changes of any Rush song whatsoever. Really, it's just a straightforward rock tune. There's a little atmospheric section in the middle, and hopefully I'm not downplaying the song in any way because it's so great, but really it's all about the songwriting. I mean, this song here is just extremely tight, extremely memorable. I mean, you hear this song one time and it just lasts in your head for life. I mean, it's great. And it's not a very poppy and not a very joyous song. It's very somber, and it's very hypnotic. And the more you listen to it, the more you get into it, you kind of lose yourself because it has this amazing hypnotic bass line running through the entire track. The doom doom doom. Fuck, I can't even do it because there's two main riffs in the track. The first one is a bass riff, which pretty much opens the song. I consider this the main riff of the track. Ironically, the bass is the lead instrument during this riff rather than the guitar, which is just working away in the background. But this one here is the hypnotic riff I'm talking about, the riff that starts off the track. But then it locks into this fantastic groove, the doom 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 doom. So groovy, and it's just perfect transition from the hypnotic riff. And here's where the verses come in. But then when the chorus comes in, it goes back to that original hypnotic riff, that hypnotic bass riff. And it's great, and the lyrics are just incredible. Apparently, the song is about man getting in touch with his more feminine side, which is sounds a little, that subject matter might not interest you, but I think it's a cool thing to talk about, and pretty brave for Rush to be embracing these kind of unconventional lyrical themes in their tracks. And Animate is definitely a great example of that. So as I mentioned, the song does get into this weird kind of experimental, or maybe not experimental, but this atmospheric section in the middle, where it actually goes on for quite a bit. I think it's about 2 minutes long, and Alex Lifeson is just playing his basically signature kind of shrieking, or I should say like wailing kind of guitar tone, but it's kind of subdued, it's kind of in the background, and Geddy Lee's pretty much pouring his heart out on this section. And again, Geddy Lee's vocals on this song never really go over the top again. It's really just more of his mid-range vocals, which is really good. Again, on the last few Rush albums, Geddy Lee was really getting in touch with more of his lower register, more of his mid-range kind of vocals. And it works really well. So you're not going to hear any shrieking, fucking classic 70s era Geddy Lee vocals, although the music definitely kind of took a step back into that direction. So Animate is a classic song. It's just all about the songwriting. It doesn't get into any crazy instrumentals, any weird time signature changes. It's just a straight up fantastic song. And I would easily give this an 8.5 to a 9 out of 10, somewhere in that range. Some days I'm feeling a 9, some days I'm feeling an 8.5. But definitely one of the highlights of the album.
Trust to your instinct if it's safely restrained. Lightning reactions must be carefully trained. Heat of the moment, persevere.
Next song on the album, Stick It Out. The reason I'm laughing is because I was just reminiscing on the first time I heard this song. I was shocked when I first heard this track. This is one of the heaviest, or maybe I should say one of the doomiest Rush songs of all time. And it was a real shock to hear this tone coming out of Alex Lifeson's guitar. Now, not to say that Alex Lifeson has no balls, far from it. Well, he did on Presto, but it's hilarious to think that just a mere 4 years after Presto, Alex Lifeson would be fucking riffing like on this song, because this is absolutely Tony Iommi level doom rock perfection. I love the song. I've always loved the song. It's just great in every single sense of the word, and really that jolt you need after that kind of atmospheric and although groovy, although pretty rockin', it was a mostly hypnotic atmospheric intro with Animate. This song here just ups the ante right away when Alex comes in with those heavy chords. You know shit's gonna hit the fan, and shit does hit the fan when it breaks into that chorus. Oh my god, guys, it's perfect. The music just stops and Geddy Lee sings, "Don't swallow your tongue," and then all of a sudden the chorus comes in and it locks into this groove that's just beyond words. It's just an incredible groove, incredibly heavy. Now it does kind of mellow out a little bit in the middle of the song, where they're singing, each time we bathe our reactions in artificial light. That part right there, which is a welcome break to the bombast of the earlier sections of the song, but it doesn't last very long, and then it locks right back into that groove. So this is literally 4.5 minutes of Rush at their absolute heaviest, one of their hardest hitting songs. And you know what? As much as I love Animate, sometimes I like this song even better than Animate. Right now, I'd put them on par, but you know, the Black Sabbath fan of me just gets so excited every time I hear this track. So I would easily give this again an 8.5 to a 9. So right on par with Animate. Just trying to see if I missed anything about this track, because it's a really interesting one here. Nah, not really. That's pretty much it. Just holy fuck, what a heavy song.
It's all a waste of time. I guess that's just a chance I'm prepared to take. A danger I'm prepared to face. Cut to the chase.
With track number 3, we get another heavy hitter on the album, guys. Cut to the Chase. This track here is just great. It's just a song that, another one, just like Stick It Out, that just grabs you by the balls and never lets go. It's always interesting throughout. And again, this is when I was talking about the pacing earlier on. Maybe they should have put a few more tracks between, Cut to the Chase and Stick It Out, because these are probably the 2 heaviest tracks on the album, and they're right next to each other. So really, I think the next song should have been Nobody's Hero, and then this should have been the next one, or maybe even the one after that, just to give the album a little bit better pacing. Because that's the thing, pacing on an album is actually really important. And, when you're picking out songs on a playlist or just listening to, like, a song you feel like at the moment, it's fine. But when you're listening to the whole album, there's a thing called listener's fatigue. And to minimize that, you really want to have some good pacing on the album. And this one doesn't have the best. But, again, forget about that. Let's just talk about the song Cut to the Chase. Let's cut to the chase and talk about Cut to the Chase, goddammit. So this song here, it opens with this really kind of brooding, sinister kind of vibe, and you can feel shit's about to hit the fan. I mean, Geddy Lee, whenever a song starts off with extremely low register Geddy Lee vocals, you know shit's going to hit the fan, because it's not going to stay that way throughout. And then when it does, it gets into this awesome powerhouse riff, another powerhouse riff from Lifeson, and it's absolutely ripping. A ripping riff. And this is where the organ kicks in. And now, sorry, earlier on I mentioned that the organ was on Animate. I actually meant Cut to the Chase. I got mixed up there, so I apologize. Too many songs, too many fucking Rush songs at this point. I'm forgetting which ones are which. But Cut to the Chase has the organ kicking in. And when it does, it really gives it that, like, nostalgic kind of vibe. Dry throat. And, yeah, there's a fucking awesome solo that ends up cutting in. And it's really the first notable solo on the album. Animate had like kind of a mini... Actually, no, I don't think Animate really has a guitar solo. Cut to the Chase kind of had one, but it wasn't really that notable. This one here is a passionate Alex Lifeson solo. Really virtuosic, really tasty. And again, like all his solos, he creates something extremely memorable in like a 20 to 30 second time span. So, I don't know if that's possible, but... fantastic solo. And again, the song's really catchy, really memorable, and really, it uses that pop kind of, the pop spirit of Rush, but reframed into the hard rock domain. So it's still really catchy and really accessible, although it is pretty heavy and pretty dark. And then my favorite part of the song is when it locks into this awesome riff right after that solo. I think that part right there, just you really needed that to elevate the song. Because so far, again, the song's been pretty straightforward, very minimal time changes. Then that comes in and it's just a facelift for the entire track. Really cool. And then there's that weird kind of cut to the chase. You know, that section there where the song just kind of pauses with this weird interlude. I love that. And then it just picks up where it started and ends off on a high note. So yeah, Cut to the Chase, another really heavy riffing song. I'd easily give this an 8.5 to 9. So as you can see, the consistency on this album has been stellar. Again, probably not Dreamline and Bravado from Roll the Bones are like amazing openers that are just as good as these tracks, but these ones have a little bit more punch to them. So it's debatable which ones have better openers. But the next track as well is also fantastic. So let's move on.
As the years went by, we drifted apart. When I heard that he was gone, I felt the shadow cross my heart. But he's nobody's hero.
Alright guys, the next song is ironically probably my favorite track on the album, or at least up there, probably like in the top 2, top 3. And I say ironically because this is probably the least heavy song on the album, or at least up there. It's I don't know if I'd classify it as a ballad, but it does have a string section, it does start off acoustically, so I'm kind of tempted to call it a ballad, but I digress. Anyway, we're talking about Nobody's Hero. And this song here is just basically the emotional powerhouse of the album. And there's a lot of emotional powerhouses coming up, but this one here just gives me chills every single time. The lyrics are so emotional, so meaningful, and just, man, it just tugs at your heartstrings. Kind of like The Pass on Presto. I do prefer this song to The Pass, and The Pass is probably my favorite track on Presto, but Nobody's Hero is definitely just one of the hardest hitting Rush songs. This was a song here that alluded to the AIDS crisis, and in a more personal way, because the song starts off describing a friend that Neil Peart had back in London, back in his London days before he got into Rush. He was trying to make it big in the music business. A very interesting period in Neil Peart's life, I should add, that not many people know about or are aware of, but it happened. But yeah, so he was basically friends with this gay guy. You know, Neil Peart's, he's heterosexual, but he was friends with a homosexual in England, and who pretty much prevented him from being homophobic in any way, according to Neil Peart. And basically they drifted away, and then later on he found out that the guy ended up dying of AIDS, which is, you know, not to go off on a tangent, but we've come so far with AIDS therapy that at this point, like, if you're on the appropriate medication and you're adhering to it, you can't pass on AIDS to anyone. So really, like, there's no risk anymore. Again, you got to assume that they're taking their medications and everything. But it's amazing to think that back then we had no such luck, and people were just dropping like flies from AIDS. And again, this was the early 90s, so stuff like Freddie Mercury was happening at this point. So again, it's a really emotional song. A lot of people must have really connected to it at the time. And again, on a personal level, Neil Peart definitely connected to it. And again, that's just part of the song. The rest of the song also deals with all kinds of other tragedies. I gather that, like, you know, the other girl in the track got hit by a car or got into some crazy accident and passed away. So the song's basically about dealing with loss. And again, it's a really emotional song. It opens up acoustically, and I was shocked when I first heard this song with the opening lines. I knew he was different in his sexuality. I went to his parties as a straight minority. I'm like, oh my God, like, what am I hearing? Like, I was shocked. Not in the sense of being like disgusted or disturbed. Not at all. I was actually like, wow, this song is risky. Even for the 90s, you know, we're not talking like the 50s here, but even for the 90s, I don't really know many other songs that really dealt with stuff like this as, you know, as head-on as Rush, as directly as Rush. And it's fantastic. And Peter Collins, he really influenced this track because he told the band to use a string section. And I really think the string section added a lot to the song. I mean, just the way it swells up during certain sections, that's what really gets those goosebumps standing. Especially right before the chorus, where he says, there's nobody. Oh, fuck. How does it lead into the chorus? I'm blanking out right now, but right before the chorus, the string section just kind of swells up. And, oh, man, it's just goosebumps every single time, without hesitation. There's an awesome guitar solo early on in the track, again, really melodic. And the string section just crashes in before that chorus again. It's just, oh, man. I don't know what else to say about it. It's just that great. My favorite part of the song is when he sings, as the years went by, we drifted apart. When I heard that he was gone, I felt a shadow cross my heart. Oh my God. Oh. Some of the best lyrics. So yeah, needless to say, Nobody's Hero is a masterpiece. I'd easily give it a 9, maybe even a 9.5 out of 10. Probably a 9, but, you know, might be generous here and there. So yeah, definitely check out Nobody's Hero, the emotional standout on the album.
In the silence between whisper and shout, the space between wonder and doubt. This is a fine place, shining face to face.
Alright guys, back from work. Had to change into these comfortable clothes. Chose my Led Zeppelin t-shirt today for today's selection. Gotta represent rock in these reviews, you know. And where were we? I think we were on track number 5, which was between. Yeah, that's right. Between the Sun and Moon. That's the next song here. Got my notes so I don't forget what I wrote before I went off to work here. But yeah, this Between the Sun and Moon is a strange song. It's a song that I wasn't a huge fan of at first, mostly because it's kind of a weird track. It doesn't really have a Rush vibe to it. I mean, that opening guitar riff, especially, that just doesn't sound anything like Alex Lifeson. If anything, to me, it kind of sounds like Mark Knopfler in the intro of like Money for Nothing or something fucked up like that. But yeah, very strange song, a very un-Alex Lifeson inspired riff, but it's good. Don't get me wrong. It has that rockin' punch to it. I think the band themselves might have compared it to, I can't remember what they said now. Was it the Rolling Stones or something? I think they compared it to the Rolling Stones, like a Keith Richards type riff. I could see that. But I think the Money for Nothing riff is just a little bit more accurate. But yeah, it's a great song, and it does lock into this awesome groove. I love the verses of the track. Again, I have no idea what the song's about. This was another one of Rush's collaborations with Pi Dubois from fuck that band, Max Webster, who he was a lyricist for that band, famously known for writing part of the lyrics on Tom Sawyer and a few other tracks. And this was just another collaboration between them. And honestly, I think it has something to do with like how the natives or the primitive people. Damn, that sounded really offensive, but you know what I mean. Like in the past, how they used to like worship the sun and the moon and things like that. That's my interpretation. So not a very meaningful song, especially coming after Nobody's Hero, but it's a good song. And what I like is that in the middle of the track, it kind of slows down a bit and it gets back into that main guitar riff, but then it kind of evolves into this guitar solo. And if you listen really carefully, you could pick out little bits and bites of Alex Lifeson playing, but overall, if someone told me it was a totally different guitarist or a guest star on the song, I would have believed them. My main problem with the track, the main reason I didn't like it at first, is the chorus. It's just a little bit. It's honestly one of the worst choruses. It's literally Geddy Lee singing yes to yes to yes. Why the sun? Like it sounds good, but it's just so weird, and I don't know. It took a while to get used to that chorus. Not one of the best, but overall it's a good song on the album. Definitely the weakest on the album so far, but still very solid. So I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10, if anything, for being unique. Alright guys, so the next track on the album, it's called Alien Shore. And now we're getting into that kind of dip I was talking about with the quality of the album. I'd say it started with Between Sun and Moon, and it continues until, I really like Double Agent, but I'd say Between Sun and Moon, Alien Shore, and Speed of Love. Sorry, had a little brain fart there. Or like the 3 kind of like low points on the album, at least in my opinion. But Alien Shore, it's actually pretty good. It actually holds up. I'm surprised how much I like this song, going back, revisiting the album. And again, like I have been listening to this album like pretty much nonstop since I heard it. But I gotta be honest, like I do skip some songs here and there because, it's like a 50-something minute album, and when you're on the go, when you want to hear the album, you only want to hear the essential tracks. And this one here, I wouldn't say is an essential track, but it's pretty good. I like the lyrics on the song, pretty much about like, it starts off talking about like the fundamental differences between a man and a woman. So you can kind of look at this as the prequel to the song Cold Fire, which comes like later on in the album. But this song deals with a lot of things. It talks about race, obviously sex in the beginning of the song, and basically how like we, as a society, we like build these inequalities between like different sexes and different races and religions that are really like manufactured and man-made and don't really mean anything. So a pretty meaningful track. What I really like about this song is Geddy Lee's bass playing. Of course, that goes without saying, it's fucking Geddy Lee, but his bass playing on the song really stands out and really, keeps it from being like kind of a mediocre song. Otherwise, there isn't really much to this. I kind of like the riff at the beginning, and when it gets into the chorus, it really ups the ante with the for you and me, sex is not a competition. Always funny hearing Geddy Lee sing that, but yeah, like overall the chorus and the bass playing are like the standout moments of the song. There's even this like psychedelic section later in the track, like that Rush do it sometimes, so they get into like this atmospheric, usually Alex Lifeson guitar driven, weird experimental section, and they do that on this track as well. But it's just not that memorable. Whenever I hear this song, I always forget that that's even in there. So, it's not the greatest track ever, but it's pretty good. My main complaint is that it's a little bit too long, almost 6 minutes. This should have really been a 4-minute song at most. So yeah, Alien Shore, 7.5 out of 10.
At the speed of love, nothing changes faster.
Alright guys, so the next track, Speed of Love. Now this one here, if you blink, you might miss this track, guys, because this song is just so uneventful, so, I was going to say uninspired, but that sounds like a dick. I'm not going to say that. Rush wanted to make this love song, and they did. And compared to the other love songs on the album, I'm gonna refer to them as love songs, but they really aren't. This is by far the worst, and this is by far the worst song on the album. Again, there's nothing really offensive about it. It just comes and goes. The chorus is a little meandering. It's a little bit too long for its own good, almost 5 minutes in length for really nothing to latch onto. Now, here's the thing. I've heard people say this is the worst Rush song of all time, and I completely disagree. I love Rush. They're one of my favorite bands, obviously. But they have made some pretty shitty songs. Rivendell, okay? If you guys saw my Fly By Night review, I hate that song. What else? A few songs off Presto, fucking Hand Over Fist, Anagram for Mongo. There's plenty of worse songs, at least in my opinion. So Speed of Love, definitely not the worst Rush song, but definitely right near the bottom for me. It's just really nothing about it that makes me want to go back and listen to it. It does have a cool bass part in the middle, which is pretty cool. Kind of gives that song that facelift that it needs. Again, Geddy Lee really powering these last few songs. But yeah, Speed of Love. I don't even know what to give this track. I already forgot how it went. No, I'm just kidding. Probably 7 at the highest.
Many decisions, a million revisions, caught between darkness and light. Wilderness of mirrors, will abolish steel.
Now we're getting back to the good shit, guys. Double Agent. Now this song here is one that has really grown on me over the years. The main reason I like it is because it's such an interesting song, such a heavy song, and again, it just shows that Rush were really doing something different with this album. It starts off pretty unassumingly. You wouldn't think the song's gonna get heavy when you have Geddy Lee singing "Where would you rather be? Anywhere." It seems like a mid-tempo kind of track, but then all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose. The whole band goes on rapid fire, and Alex Lifeson just comes up with this extremely intense riff that just comes out of nowhere, just grabs you by the balls, and you're like, holy shit, we're back in the heaviness category. Songs like this, Stick It Out, Cut to the Chase, these are the real heavy hitters on the album. And then all of a sudden, we get Geddy Lee doing some spoken word singing here, and I guess that's kind of an oxymoron, because you can't really be speaking at the same time. But needless to say, we get some spoken word by Geddy Lee, and it sounds really intense, really kind of creepy and atmospheric, and really interesting. You don't hear that shit every day, so it really makes the song stand out. And then another thing I love about the song is that it has a lot of seamless transitions. Again, that seems like a no-brainer with Rush, but I really like how they just go from this bombastic, heavy riff back to the original section of the song, perfect, seamlessly, and then it builds up to this really emotional, really climactic chorus. Where they sing, "A wilderness of mirrors." Na, 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 na. That part there, I can't really remember the lyrics, but yeah, it's so cool. And Neil Peart's going crazy. He's just hitting the shit out of these drums. Really heavy playing, really heavy-handed, trading the intricacy of his usual playing for more just bombastic awesomeness. So yeah, Double Agent's a really cool track. Surprisingly enough, this is another song I sometimes see people calling one of the worst Rush songs, and now that I don't understand. At least Speed of Love, you got something there, but Double Agent, it's great. So this is easily an 8.5 out of 10, and a big highlight of the second half of the album. Alright guys, then we get into the instrumental of the album, Leave That Thing Alone. Really similar title to the one from the previous album, Roll the Bones. I think it was called Where's My Thing, or fuck, I always forget the name of that song. But needless to say, you can forget about that track, because this song here just trumps it in every single sense of the word. I mean, this song here, it's just unbelievable. You can't even compare them. It makes the other song look bad. This is a fantastic Rush instrumental. And again, just like the previous song, rather than focusing on just, displaying their virtuosity like YYZ or La Villa Strangiato, this song here really does have more of a narrative feel to it, more of an ebb and flow to it. I guess it is a little bit more show-offy than Where's My Thing, because there are a lot of like bass showcases here and guitar showcases. But overall, it does have like a few solid themes that kind of go throughout the entire song. And the more I think about it, the more YYZ was kind of like the same thing, and so was La Villa Strangiato. So it's really a blurred line. But this song really does feel like it could have had vocals at some points, and kind of has like a verse chorus kind of feel to it. But needless to say, it's an excellent song. It starts off with this pretty relaxing riff, and then one of my favorite Rush moments of all time, when Geddy Lee comes in with that intro bass line. Oh my god, it kills me every fucking time. It's just so sexy, so suave and laid back, and so cool. One of the coolest moments in Rush. And the song just takes off from there, gets into the grooviest riff you can ever imagine. And then this dreamlike guitar comes in, so atmospheric. You just lay back and you're like, just feel like $1,000,000 when you listen to that riff. It just takes you away. You're like easily daydream to it. Really good stuff. And then Neil Peart's doing all kinds of crazy shit in the background, like all these weird sound effects. Sounds like, at one point, it sounds like he's slapping someone's ass in the background. Makes like this fucking, like, ass slapping sound, which is pretty cool. And like fireworks going off, all kinds of crazy percussion things going on. And the middle of the song is really busy. It gets into this, there's fucking organ that comes in at one point, some crazy bass work by Geddy Lee, and then a really sinister riff comes in, like this fucking really like dark riff. But before that, I should mention that it also kind of reprises Where's My Thing. There's kind of like a variation on the main riff of that song. Or maybe I'm overthinking it, but it sounds similar to the Where's My Thing riff. It makes sense, because like the thing is in the song, whatever that thing could be. I don't know. But yeah, it eventually just wraps up and gets back into the original theme. And there's also a pretty great guitar solo that really just bursts onto the song, and has really emotional feel, really climaxes, really intensifies as it progresses. So really all the elements of a great Rush instrumental. So Leave That Thing Alone, easily a 9 out of 10. Sometimes I'd give it like a 9.5, but I gotta like, pull back sometimes and say, okay, maybe I'm giving it too much credit. But a 9 seems pretty straightforward, pretty solid. So
I don't understand those songs you love. She said, this is not a love song. This is in fantasy land. Phosphorescent wave on a tropical sea is a cold fire.
Alright guys, next track on the album, Cold Fire. And this is hands fucking down, one of the most underappreciated Rush songs of all time. I mean, I never hear anyone discussing this track, and I just want to give it its just desserts, because I think Cold Fire is easily one of the best songs on the album. Right up there with Leave That Thing Alone, right up there with Nobody's Hero, Animate, songs like that. Like the best songs on the album, and this one here always had a special place in my heart. The first time I heard it, really like affected me, and in a good way. Like I really thought it was emotional. I thought it was a powerhouse song, and really like one of the most mature sounding Rush songs. I love the lyrics that deal with basically dealing within the boundaries within a relationship, and pushing those boundaries to the maximum, whatever that means. You can use your imagination, but again, it's a love song per se, but it deals with all these mature themes and subject matter that you don't see a lot of from Rush. So really interesting, really dark lyrics, and man, I just love it. I love the whole feel of the song. I love the whole atmosphere. It has this kind of like smoky backroom kind of vibe to it. Really chill, really laid back, but it does have some heavy hitting moments. First point in case. The first riff of the song just comes right in, comes cutting in with this extreme intensity. And it's a great opening riff. Really grabs your attention. Then it gets into the laid back, more like atmospheric section. Geddy Lee singing in a very mid-range register. But before you know it, this chorus comes in. And guys, let me tell you, this chorus here is one of the catchiest, most infectious choruses Rush ever made. And it's just so intense, and it just stabs you. It's just a relentless chorus that just powers through and never loses any steam. Such a beautiful song, really emotional. And oh my god, guys, there's this explosive guitar solo at the end. Probably my favorite Alex Lifeson guitar solo on the entire album. It's just really memorable, and it's, you know, not that the other solos weren't memorable, but this one here, like, it really sticks with you over time. And I love how it just comes in seamlessly, as always. Perfection. Just a perfect song. Honestly, I'm tempted to give this a 9.5 out of 10, but right now I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10 just to be safe. But yeah, definitely one of the best songs on the album. It could even be the best. It's arguably the best track on the album. But, oh man, Leave That Thing Alone and Nobody's Hero might just be like this much better. This much. Actually, I think I like this song better than Leave That Thing Alone. As great as that instrumental was, this one here, fuck, I'm so torn, guys. I have no idea what I like more. But anyway, the point is, it's a fantastic song, and it just keeps this amazing streak that started with Double Agent and lasts all the way to the end of the album.
If the future's looking dark, we're the ones who have to shine. If there's no one in control, we're the ones who draw the line.
Here goes Rush again, tugging at my heartstrings. The final track on the album, Everyday Glory. It's such an emotional song, such a powerhouse track. Deals with so many mature themes. Again, divorce and how it affects kids, and basically domestic abuse, and really how it affects the kids. And that, come on, who can't relate to that? Even if you haven't been a victim of like a domestic abuse or anything like that, you see it in the news all the time. You see its effects on other people. It's totally relatable, totally heartfelt, and it's hard not to like get emotional listening to this track. But you know, the music prevents you from sometimes, because let me just adjust the camera a little bit. There we go. The music kind of prevents you because it's actually a pretty upbeat song instrumentally. Only the lyrics really deal with that, and I think that was definitely done on purpose. I think it was done to show like there's a sense of hope in all these desperate scenarios. And really the title, Everyday Glory, I don't know, it's kind of a mysterious title, because there's nothing really glorious about domestic abuse, but maybe the song is focusing more on like overcoming that and like growing as a person. And I don't know, it's just, fuck. Neil Peart, what a fucking genius. His songwriting on this, his lyric writing, I should say, is just absolutely iconic. And there's this amazing bridge coming near the end of the track where they sing, oh man, how does it go again? Oh, if the future's looking dark. That part right there, I think that's the emotional crux of the song, and what really powers it, and especially when Geddy Lee's singing, no matter what they say. Oh man, that right there just gets you every time. Instrumentally, it's not like virtuosic or anything, but it really packs a punch. Just kind of like Cold Fire that came right before it, Nobody's Hero. It's more in that vein, more of a, not really a heavy track, but definitely a guitar-driven one, and a fantastic one at that. Great way to close the album. And, man, so many freaking highlights on this album. Just think about it. Animate, Stick It Out, Nobody's Hero, Cut to the Chase. Like, those first 4 tracks are just incredible. And then the last 4 tracks as well. So you have 8 amazing Rush songs on this album. Totally forgot to give this song a rating. Easily an 8.5 out of 10. Easily. For Everyday Glory. But again, you got 8 classic Rush songs, and then 3 Rush songs that are just pretty good. So honestly, Counterparts is a fantastic album. My favorite album since Power Windows, hands down. And yeah, their best album for a very, very long time, until a certain album came out in 2012 that took the whole music scene by storm. So yeah, that's Counterparts. Thanks again for joining me, guys. It's been a pleasure making this video, listening to Counterparts a few times just to like get in the zone. It's been so pleasurable, and I can't wait to dive into Test for Echo next week. You know, that album gets a bad rap, and like part of it is justified, but there's some nuggets. There's some tasty nuggets on that album. So stay tuned for that, and as always, peace out. Thanks for watching, and rest in peace to Neil Peart.